the Boole program does not come with pre-given files, right? So when you're asked to complete an exercise where you're constructing a truth table, you know you're going to jump into Boole, and it will be the case that you build your exercise. So just as a quick reminder, you've got two panes, right? There's a vertical line that separates one pane, the left side, from the right. The left side is where you build your referent column or reference columns. So you'll have a referent as you're working through your truth table that you build on the right side. So there was a sentence that we just looked at where I'm going to use the shorter version. Connor had a neither nor. Now, rather than use the blocks language, although we can here, for the moment, let's just use capital letters A through Z. Remember that we saw last week, you can notate an atomic sentence not only with predicates and constants, but you could also notate with a capital letter A through Z. So what if I say, and I'm going to just hit the caps lock button, if you use lowercase, Boole's going to think that you're dealing with an individual constant with a name. So I'm going to use caps lock and I'm going to hit A, and now I've got my atomic sentence A. And then if I hit Control A, or if I'm on an Apple machine, Command A, or I go up to the table drop-down menu, then you get, add column after. And notice what happens is you get a vertical line. And then I know that a lot of you probably can't see the numbering, but just above the A in a green pair of parentheses is the number 1. That's your first sentence in the order of sentences. And then now in black, you've got number 2, but when you create another sentence, another atomic sentence, now it's green. So Connor had mentioned something, it was a neither nor sentence, right? So let's go ahead and make that sentence over here in the sentence window. So where we can use the buttons to a limited extent, right? So here's the negation. And then notice what's happened. Right now we don't have even remotely close to a well-formed formula. In other words, if you were to work a translation to which Grade Grinder responds, this is not a well-formed formula, that's logic's way of saying your sentence isn't grammatical, right? So, you need to have all your notational elements in order. So we need not just the negation, we need, in this case, because we want to write neither nor, negation, parenthesis, A, disjunction, B, close parenthesis. Okay. Now, why is it that I still have a red in number 1? What's the problem? Lowercase b, yeah. So one of the things that's great about these programs is you get some automatic feedback, so that you don't have to toil away pencil paper, and find out later you've made an error that's thrown your whole table off. This is a minor bit of feedback. In fact, lots of times I'm not paying attention, and I'm like, why are they giving me a red 1? I don't get it, and I just don't see literally. Visually, it's not occurring to my eyeballs, and my brain is not processing the lowercase. Okay. All right, so now I get my green check mark. So before we move forward here, does everybody remember that in order to determine whether or not this sentence is true, we need to be armed with a couple of pieces of information. One is we need to know which one of the two connectives drives or governs the sentence. In other words, is this a negation sentence or a disjunction sentence? What do you think? What's your intellectual gut say? Okay, I'm hearing negation. I heard a tentative disjunction. Here's a tip. Whether you're translating or you're already in the propositional logic notation that we're using. Your main connective, when you have two or more connectives, one of them drives the sentence. Your main connective will never be in a parenthetical. The point of the parenthetical is to treat what's within the parentheses as a single unit. So this sentence says not, in this case, or. So neither nor. Now, if you don't have a pair of parentheses, and I'll show you that in just a moment, rephrase. Just because a connective is not within parentheses doesn't mean that it is the main connective, right? So I'll give you an example of that in a little bit. But when you've got two connectives, one of which is in the parentheses, the parenthetical connective is not the main one. Connor, what are you thinking?
So it's a negation right now, right?
Yeah.
Would it be a disjunction if it was not A and not B? If it was formatted instead of being in the parentheses, like if it was written as not A and not B?
Now, I got thrown off by your use of the connective word disjunction.
Mm-hmm.
What you've done, so let me do this. I'm going to write Control or Command A, so I get another sentence. So this vertical bar with the number 2 tells me this is my second sentence. I'm not adding to my first sentence. And Connor says, let's type this, negation A, conjunction, negation B. So short story is what you did from 1 to 2 is you demorganized the thing. We'll talk about that. Your the language you used was perfectly great, except you used disjunction, and what you meant to say was negation A, conjunction, negation B.
Okay.
Yeah? So now here, we don't have any parenthetical, right? So there are a couple of things to tie together what we just said. First, your main connective is never going to be within the parenthetical. But if you don't have parentheses, that's not helpful. Sometimes, though, when you have parentheses and multiple connectives outside parentheses, right, you're still left in the same bag as and the same difficulty as you're left here, which is, well, what's the connective? The question that you answer is, here are a couple ways to ask the question. What drives this sentence? Or what's the scope of each of the connectives? In other words, is this a both and? Is this a neither not sort of, or not both, or a neither nor? In other words, what's the scope of the negation, the first negation, the second negation, and the connective, the conjunction in between? So the short answer is the first negation covers only A, right? The second negation covers only B. If I had done this, I'll take it away in a moment. If I had put a pair of parentheses around A conjunction, not B, then we now have the scope of the first negation that covers the whole, right? Since, however, there's no, or sorry, let me stay within this for just a moment to really ram the point home. Can you see, I hope even more clearly that, let me get this out of your way, this cursor. Can you see even more clearly that the negation inside the parenthetical covers just B, right? So now when we take away the parenthesis, open parenthesis, and then the closed parenthesis, right? Now we see that it's not just the negation in front of the B that covers just B. The negation in front of the A covers just A. That leaves conjunction as your driving connective. So this sentence is a both are not. So the first sentence, number 1, says not either or neither. The second sentence says not one and not the other, which is to say both are not. Yeah? Okay, does everybody also remember from Thursday that when we talked about whether or not a sentence is true, we talked about beginning with our atomic sentences, right? So let's go back over to the reference columns, reference column set. Okay, so when I click under the atomic A, I can now start typing. I've kept my caps lock on. I could say A is true, click on B, and B is true. That's one possible combination. Another possible combination is that A is true and B is false. Another combination is that A is false and B is true. And the last possible combination is that each is false. Now we'll see, we haven't quite got there yet, but we'll see the layout's always like this. In other words, we'll see how we determine how many rows there will be in a sentence, let's say, that has 3, 4, 5 atomic constituents, right? It gets exponentially longer. But it really doesn't matter how many rows of a truth table you have. The leftmost, the first sentence in the order, is always going to be half true, half false, and then it gets halved from there on until you get to the last sentence on the right, and that's always going to alternate T false me, really? True, false, true, false. Again, we'll get into the technical details, but for right now, the goal is for you to be super duper comfortable, not just super, but super duper comfortable with what it is that we're doing when we put capital letters A through Z, you know, up on the board or in Boole, what our possible truth value combinations are, and this is what we're working on Thursday, how we determine the possible truth values of a given sentence, right? So remember this. Now, we said that this sentence is the sentence number 1 is a negation sentence, right? So that means that the negation drives the truth table, which means that we will determine the or values first. Now, here's another nice feature of Boole. If you say, I think that the negation is the sub-value, is the sub-connective, I should say. Notice when you put your cursor under the negation, in the column under the negation, the reference is now the column under disjunction. So Boole is telling you, you can't deal with negation until you first deal with the disjunction. Right? So that is a really, really nice feature. If you weren't told this by Boole, right, and you didn't have anybody to ask right away, you might churn out a truth table that's inaccurate because you've chosen the wrong connective as the main one. Okay? So we determine our disjunction values first. Do you remember our truth definitions for each of the connectives? Yeah. Here's a shorthand. A disjunction is false when and only when each of the disjuncts is false. In every other case, it's true. So here we go. And I'm going to sound like my second grade teacher. Why? Because this always feels to me like learning the times tables in the second grade. Did you do the times table chant all together? You what, Miguel? You didn't learn your times tables? All right, well, this will be fun for you then. Are you ready? Okay, remember everybody but Miguel. Did you guys do 1 times 1 is 1? 1 times 2 is 2. What? Yeah, Elizabeth is saying it. Elizabeth, yeah? Yeah. Elizabeth saying, yeah, I remember that. Right? Those are the good old days where like all 40 or 50 of us were all in a row going, 1 times 1 is 1. Okay, so true disjunction, true is. True disjunction, false is. Is what? Cierto? Certo. Yeah, like Italian. Yeah. False disjunction, true is. False disjunction, false is. So you're done, right? Now we move over to, now we're in a position to deal with our negation, right? What's the definition of the negation? The negation's truth value is always the opposite of the sentence it negates, right? So not true is, not true is, not true is, not false is. Well done. One other thing to point out is this. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a number in parentheses here. This is 1, and number in parentheses here. This is 2, to match with sentence 1 and sentence 2. But the number in the parenthetical at the bottom of the column tells you which is the main connective. So that's also helpful. Saying, look, determine this set of values last. All right. Now, it doesn't matter since the conjunction is the main connective, and this negation and this negation are applicable only to the atomic sentence right next to it. Doesn't matter if you go left to right or right to left. Notice also, again, when you click in the column under the connective you want to deal with, the referent values are highlighted, right? So notice not A refers you to the far left, to the reference column A. So negation true is, negation true is, negation false is, negation false is. I want you to get that sort of times table chant boredom, right? In other words, I want you to like, I've got these. You want to just know what your values are. All right, where do I go now? To the other negation. Negation true is, negation false is, negation true is, negation false is. Okay. All right, so we've now covered our truth definitions and applied them, 4 and 2 respectively, disjunction and negation. Now we're ready for conjunction. A conjunction is true when and only when each of the conjuncts is true. In all other cases, it's awesome. So, false conjunction false is, false conjunction true is, true conjunction false is, true conjunction true is. Yee! All right. First off, and don't feel shy, I hope, about sharing how things are going. What's our confidence level here? Do you say, yes, I understand not just my atomic sentence notation, that is capital letters A through Z. I also understand my atomic sentence notation in terms of the blocks language, right? I also understand each of my 3 connectives. I understand what the negation is and what it does, what the conjunction is and what it does, what the disjunction is and what it does, and how I organize each, right? So for example, negation always goes to the left of whatever is being negated. It's the immediate left or the immediate most left, right? Conjunction and disjunction always are sandwiched, right? Conjunction and disjunction are like, you know, the white stuff in the Oreo cookie. Although I heard that they're making buffalo wing Oreos. I know, and that just sounds all kind of wrong. Whatever the interior of the sandwich is, right? That's your conjunction or your disjunction. Okay, now I know there's a lot to look at on the screen, so I'm going to ask us to move to the board in just a moment. But first, we talked about the following just briefly, I think, on Thursday. If you go over to the far right set of buttons and you click on Verify Table, and then cast your eyeballs over to the far left. Do you see where there's a blue check mark next to correct and a blue check mark next to complete? Those are great for you to have to make sure that you have constructed a truth table that is not only a complete truth table, you're not missing, for example, any T's or F's, right? But also that you've correctly determined the values. I'm telling you, when you get to a 64-row truth table, having that is really helpful, okay? Now, let's push on. Let's come back to, right? So we've done our groundwork. We're now ready to come back to the evaluation or the assessment of the thing. Remember earlier you were working on exercises where you were asked to write a sentence in a way that's equivalent, right, to the original. So here's the question to you. We talked about this a bit on Thursday. Is sentence 1 equivalent to sentence 2? And what do I mean by equivalent? I mean truth table equivalent or truth functionally equivalent. The language we will learn, this is coming up, we'll focus on Thursday on this language, are these two sentences tautologically equivalent? So that's a fancy pants word, the meaning of which we will get to. But for right now, there are going to be 3 ways to talk about sentences saying the same thing. Truth table equivalent, truth functionally equivalent, tautologically equivalent, when we're just dealing with connectives, right? So how do we know? Well, and this is why I want us to move to the board in just a moment. You look under the values, you look in the column under the main connective, and you see the values there. You look under the main connective in the column, let me rephrase that once again. You look in the column under the main connective and look at the values there. You're ignoring everything else. That's because everything else helped build to the main connective. So what I'll ask us to do is turn our attention to the board where we can see, so let's take not parentheses A disjunction B, second sentence, not A and not B, and we have false, 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 true, and under the conjunction, false, 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 true. Can you see that on each row of the truth table, the 2 sentences have the same truth values? So we'd say then that these 2 sentences are tautologically equivalent, truth functionally equivalent, more broadly logically equivalent. What do we think? What do you think of Miguel?
I mean, the table, I guess, is telling me that they are both tautologically true, but I think
They don't feel that way, do they, to you? Yeah.
because the first one says not A or B, while the second one says not A and not B.
So one of the lovely things about the truth table is that it gives us a way to rethink kind of maybe what our habitual ways of thinking are. Let me ask you this question. What's your bag, your deal, your thing? Like, are you like a sports person? Are you a politics person? Are you...
All around. Anything works.
Anything works. Okay. So I think on Thursday we were using something like the basketball. Yeah, right. So if I say neither the neither the Lakers nor the Celtics won the 2018, was it 18? Whatever. Won the NBA championships. So it's not the case that either Lakers or Celtics won. It's not the case that the Lakers won, and it's not the case that the Celtics won. When I'm saying not either one, I'm saying both did not. Both are not. Each of us has a nice, or sorry, rephrase. Each of us finds one of these more intuitive than the other. Somebody earlier was like, I like this one, not this one. I mean, right. So if you're not sure, if it feels weird to you and you know you've constructed the truth table correctly, you'll say, no, I see it, and then eventually it gets more comfortable.
I see what my miscommunication was. So I was thinking that not A or B, so as long as one of them isn't true, but that's
We don't know which one.
yeah.
Sorry, rephrase.
Yeah.
If it's not A or not B, then we don't know which one is not. But this is, remember, treating
As
A
long as one of them isn't true.
right.
Yeah.
So think about it this way. The parenthetical says this is just this is a single entity that's being rejected, right? And these are the values that come out. Here we've got each side of the conjunction, right, that's rejected, and so we get the relevant values.
I wasn't thinking of it as like an algebraic expression. I guess I was thinking about it as an English expression.
Okay.
And that's what like.
So normally when we think of when we run into that particular trouble, it seems to me, at least anecdotally, that the issue is with the not both, which we can do next. So here's an assessment for us. So there's an assessment button. Click on the assessment button, and a pop-up window appears. Now I'm going to ask us to ignore the bottom for right now. We're asked to determine, in this case, whether or not the sentences are tautologically equivalent. In other words, from the standpoint of the truth table, do they say the same thing? You say yes, they do. You click OK. Now you can, up here in the upper right, the bottom button, verify, assess, and woohoo! Okay. Now, does it make sense to say that since these two sentences say the same thing, they're truth functionally equivalent sentences, they're truth table equivalent, that where you have one, you can substitute the other and vice versa? Okay. That's really good to know as we're moving forward. This is one of two what are called De Morgan's equivalences, just named after Augustus De Morgan, the mathematician who came up with them. Are we ready for the other De Morgan's equivalence? How are we doing on Boole? What do you guys think? Remember, Boole does not give you any files. You construct everything yourself, and then you save accordingly. Okay. So here, what I'm going to do is just create a new Boole window, because I think it might end up being more efficient than typing over. And I want to show you or remind you, because I think we talked about this on Thursday. When you, you've got your atomic sentence and then use command or control or add sentence after. When you generate your atomic sentences for your reference columns, you can go up to table and tell Boole to fill in the reference columns. Now, some exercises you'll find will tell you expressly, don't let Boole fill them for you. You should fill them yourself, because they want you to get used to doing this. And we'll work on this more on Thursday. But for now, I hope you can see that the fill is the same, right? So it doesn't matter what the sentences are. In other words, it could be A or B, or you could start out with P or Q. It really doesn't matter. The far left always has half true, half false, and then those values get halved, H-A-L-V-E-D, so that at the end, depending on how many atomic sentences you have, you will have alternating true, false, true, false, true, false. And these increase exponentially. So what if, so I'm going to go ahead and erase here. What if you have not 2 atomic sentences, but 3? How many do you think you might have? How many possible permutations are there?
9.
Just 8, okay, and 9. Now, you're close, Connor. We're going to learn a formula, but for right now,
This is 2 to the power of 3.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
the number of rows or line numbers is 2 to the number of atomic sentences, yeah? So, but don't worry about that. We'll get to it Thursday. But notice, A gets half true, half false. B takes half of the first 4 values, right? And then takes chunks of 2, right? So 2 true, 2 false, 2 true, 2 false. I can't say that 5 times fast. And then C, now as the last sentence on the right, is alternating TF, 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 TF. All right, so I'm going to get rid of column 3, and then we'll go ahead and reinstate our original values. Okay, so you saw neither A nor B is tautologically equivalent to not A and not B. Now let's take a look at, I hope that having them side by side does not mess with your thinking. Tell me if it does. Now we're going to say not parentheses A and B, close parentheses, close parenthesis, and then add a sentence after, not A or not B. So how do we read this sentence? We read the sentence as, we read the first sentence, I should say, as follows. It's not the case that both or not both, right? So notice, when the negation is out front, you're starting your ordinary language sentence, or the way I articulated it verbally, with that negation. And then the second sentence says either not one or not the other. You could say it's not this one or it's not that one. And whereas not both is pretty common in our daily ways of speaking, the second sentence, either not one or not the other, is not so common. So when Miguel made that great point about feeling like he wasn't seeing the equivalence, and then he was, I think it had to do with pushing the negations through. Typically, it's this one that's harder. We typically want to do something like this. We typically want to say not both means one or the other. We drop the negation, but that won't fly for truth functionality. All right, so question for you. Sentence 1, the main connective is what? Negation. So we're going to run through our determinations. True conjunction true is. True conjunction false is. Look at the reference columns. False conjunction true is. False conjunction false is. Okay, now we're ready for the negation. Negation true is. Negation false is. Negation false is. Negation false is. Fabulous. Wonderful. And make a whole Broadway show out of it. Now, I guess that's not a popular idea. Okay. Main connective here is what? The negation, the first negation, the disjunction, or the second negation? The disjunction, yeah. Let's just, for the heck of it, guys, let's go right to left. Oops, I'm in the wrong column. By the way, how was I shown that I was in the wrong column? When I clicked under the disjunction, the negation columns were highlighted, so it's kind of nice. All right, so not B. Here we go. Negation true is, negation false is, negation true is, negation false is, and then our leftmost negation. So negation true is, negation true is, negation false is, negation false is. Good. I hope you're just like, you're realizing, oh, I just keep churning these out, right? And then lastly, what is the one and only one case or condition under which the disjunction is false? It's when? Yeah, when each of the disjuncts is false. So, false disjunction false is. False disjunction true. True disjunction false. True disjunction true. Yay! All right. Here we go. I suppose I should have done this earlier. Did we construct a complete and correct table? Why, yes, we did. Boole just told us. Woohoo! All right, I'm not going to put this on the board. I want you to tell me what you think. Sort of look through the T's and the F's. Find the main connective. Look at the column under the main connective. Look at the truth values in the column under each of the main connectives. Is sentence 1 a tautological equivalent to sentence 2 and vice versa? I've got one nodding yes, one shaking head no. So guess who's going to decide it for us? That's a whole different conversation, Connor. We're going to let Boole tell us what to do. We click on the assessment. All right. So who says it's not? Let's say it's not, right? Click OK. Verify, assess. X. Okay, let's go back. So we got our red X. Okay, I'm sorry, Boole, we were wrong. The sentences are tautologically equivalent. Verify, assess, yes, they are. So one of the cool things you can do as you're working through stuff, and if you're like me, going through things very slowly is a good thing. I get very easily confused. I get easily turned around, especially with T's and F's and individual letters. I can swap places of things, right? So going through really slowly helps, but also having Boole really helps, because if you find out that you're incorrect, you can maybe start to look for what you think has gone wrong. And then if you are correct, you can reinforce that, right? If Boole says you are correct, you've then had your idea reinforced. So do you want to put just the values under the main connective on the board here, so that you can see how these two sentences are equivalent? All right, so I'm just going to separate these out. So not both A and B. We separate from either not A or not B. And I'm just going to duplicate the values under each of the main connectives. So false, true, 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 and main connective, false, true, true, true. So row 4, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got the same values on each row. Okay. So I find that sometimes the clutter that you're seeing, on Boole distracts me. For even longer sentences, and I want to sort of make a slight transition to another way that you can fill out your truth table by hand. But another thing that sometimes is a little uncomfortable for me, especially when my tables are really long, if I only have those reference columns, and I can't put my T's and my F's directly under the atomic sentence in question, I sometimes get thrown off. So what I mean by that is this. I oftentimes like to do the following. Put my original values directly under the atomic sentence, And then as I'm working, so I'm just going to go the other direction here. I've got the values that I calculate, right? And then I calculate again. And then when I get to the final ones, then I can get rid of them in order to highlight, right? So that's another way. So it's just if you're doing them by hand. Connor, what are you thinking?
So earlier when we were doing the thing in Tarski's, right? You
Yeah.
said that the two sentences the same size, A, B, and the like. Then the second sentence we made where it's small a, small b.
Yeah,
That whole thing. Those wouldn't be tautologically
Yeah,
equivalent, right?
I'm so glad you asked. Let's hope this is catching. We'll see. All right. So obviously we have been spending all this time today working with atomic sentences that don't have any discernible meaning beyond their stipulated definition and use, right? So A, B, C, D, and so forth, those are just atomic sentence A. We don't know what it stands for. On the other hand, when we take our blocks language sentences, we do know what larger, smaller, right? We know what that means. So what if I do the following? I'm going to say A is small, A is medium. Oh, sorry, guys. I meant to write A is, oh, no, I did. I thought that said larger. Okay, so A is small. That's sentence, atomic sentence 1. A is medium. That's atomic sentence 2. A is large, right? And we know, just because we had a brief chat about it, that with 3 atomic sentences, there are 8 rows of the truth table. Let's just go ahead and ask ask Boole to fill for us. So notice the far left, half true, half false. Then the middle takes half of the first true values, true truth values, and clusters them in 2s, right? So 2 true, 2 false, 2 true, 2 false, and then alternating. Always the far right will alternate true, false, true, false. Now, let's see, small, medium, large. So A is small, or A is medium, or A is large. Now, I hope that it's clear, but if it's not, I'm going to reiterate that we're not looking at multiple sentences here. We're looking at one sentence, right? And the question before us is whether or not this sentence is always true. We said when we were looking in Tarski's world that it is a tautologically true sentence by way of Tarski's world. We want to avoid quite exactly that language. We want to say that the sentence is a Tarski's world necessity, or the sentence is necessarily true in Tarski's world. There's no world you could build where this sentence is false. And that's because of the restrictions of the world. Does that make some sense to say? Some of you are like, yeah, awesome. If some of you are like, no, I don't know what you mean, I hope as we work through this, you'll start to go, okay, I think I get this. The question now is, so this is what Connor's asking, if I make a truth table for this sentence, is this sentence going to come out true in every instance? That is, in every instance under the main connective. Now, one thing we didn't really chat about, and we'll chat more about this on Friday, maybe today, we'll see, but is the following. When you have more than one connective, it's very often the case, as you've already seen, that you need some parentheses, right? So obviously, when you're dealing with a negation whose scope governs a compound sentence, you need a pair of parentheses. It's not the case, as we saw with the sentence not A, conjunction not B, that you always have to use parentheses when you have multiple connectives. So that's one case. It's also the case that in our version of the system, when you have multiple conjunctions or multiple disjunctions, so when you have a sentence with nothing other than conjunctions or nothing other than disjunctions, you don't have to put a pair of parentheses around one of the connectives. But there's kind of a default, which we'll see in just a moment. If I click on the very first connective, the very first iteration of the or, you'll notice that the reference is to the two atomic sentences, A and B. Or sorry, small a and medium A. If I were to put my cursor under the column, in the column under the second connective, or the second iteration of the disjunction, now the reference is back to the first disjunction and the third atomic sentence. So that's kind of the default, even though the parentheses aren't used. All right, so what do we know about the disjunction? It is false when and only when each of the disjunctions. Try again. That's my game show voice that doesn't work. You're a winner in any case, guys. A disjunction is false when and only when each of the disjuncts is false. Awesome. So tell me what to type. I'm not gonna do the chant.
4 truths, 6 truths, and 2 falses.
Oh, I'm not smart enough for that, Connor. Go one line at a time for me. Tell me what to type, guys. Ready? Go. True. 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 False. False. Okay. La-di-da-da-da-da-da-da. Whoopsie. Went up too far. Okay. Tell me what to type.
True. 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 False.
So close. Do you see the number in the parenthetical at the bottom of the column under the second disjunction? That tells us that
It's not always true.
the sentence is not always true. And you might say, but Mia, look, in 7 out of 8, oh, no. Logic doesn't care about frickin' 7 out of 8, right? The truth table says, Boole says, if this sentence is going to be a tautology, which is a sentence that is always true, truth functionally true, right? Then that sentence has to be true on every row. There cannot be even one possible scenario that is one row on which the sentence is false. So this sentence may be a Tarski's world necessity, but it's not a tautology. Kind of cool, huh? What's a tautology? A tautology is a sentence that's always true. You want to see one? Yes, Mia. Do you want to see a tautology? Okay, I'm going to give you the simplified version here. All right. A, or not A. What's the main connective?
I mean, or.
It's, yeah, was that you, Matthew? Yeah, it wasn't you? Whoever it was, yes. Who was that? Who said or? Romton, yes. You threw your voice, Romton. So or, which means we have to deal with A first, right? How many, oh, sorry, our reference column. One atomic sentence means true or false. Beautiful. So, negation true is, negation false is, what do we know about a disjunction?
What?
A disjunction is false when and only when
Both premises are false.
each of the disjuncts
Oh,
is
yeah.
false, yeah. So that means True, true. This sentence is always true. What? What are we thinking? So some people, here's what I'm interpreting, here's what I interpret from the expressions on some faces. Some faces are like, yeah, okay. Most faces are like, you're trying to pull one over on us. Something's going, what are you doing? And you're saying it just like that, right? If you're feeling a little doubtful, if you're thinking, I don't know if I buy this, this is the conversation that I think we should have is kind of what's bugging you. First off, how are we doing with our connectives? We know what our connectives are. We know how to use them, right? We know where to put them in a sentence. We know how to incorporate parentheses as we need them, right? Okay, so all that's good. We know when a negation's true. We know when a negation's false. We know when a conjunction's true, when a conjunction's false. We know when a disjunction's true and a disjunction is false. If there are any troubles there, let's make sure we address those before we move on to anything else. How about main connective or main operator questions? What's our thought there? Like, are you comfortable with dealing with what is in a multi-compounded sentence? What's a subconnective versus what's a main connective? Matthew, what are you thinking?
So those are the two, just like true, false, thing, but these are what we're looking at exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Does everybody want to work on that a little bit? I think we should before we move on. So Matthew, you want that's not as bad as the time that I had my phone in my pocket and I walked into the ocean. I'm sorry. Oh boy. What is it? First initial. Not Dante in front of Dante. First initial. It's not Ahmad. Armand. Yeah, Armand's looking at me like I just grew a third eye. I don't know what all that's about, but okay. So yeah, I did walk into the ocean, and I do these really stupid things. No, I didn't drop the computer just now. Okay. I want to first make sure you're comfortable. Let's review our truth definitions, right? So any sentence in the universe is either true or false, right? So we say that if it's not the case that this sentence is true, the sentence is false. And if it's, and this I know is a little bit of a mind twister, but a mental twister, if it's not the case the sentence is false, the sentence is true. Okay. So with this in mind, when you have a sentence, let's say like this, right? Or you have a sentence like this, where here the negation covers just A, or here the negation covers the disjunction, right? Whatever A's values are, you reject them. So what if I were to tell you, so let's work backward, but first, hold on just a second. If we have two atomic sentences, right? Is everybody comfortable with the definitions for conjunction? To say that these are the truth definitions for the connective is just to say that these are always and only the ways that this sentence can be true or false, where what I mean is these are all and only the ways that a sentence governed by conjunction is true or false. So, I want to do this one. So, true, false, false, false. Oh, I messed up on my colors, didn't I? I'm trying to keep the color coding consistent. I apologize. So true, false, false, false. And you could put the T's and F's right under A and B if you wanted. And then lastly, A or B, right? There's one in one case only when the disjunction is false, and that's when they're both false. Right? Connor, what are you thinking? You good?
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, what's our confidence level here? Some people are going, yeah, some people might still be a little tentative, but even if you feel a little bit tentative, if some of the basic thinking makes sense to you, right? That is, you understand that what a conjunction means, what a disjunction means. If there's a disconnection between understanding the meaning of the connective and the values, I think that will come. All right, now, what if I say, and I'll make this black because the green's not showing up so hot. What if I were to say this? So I hope, Matthew, this works. I hope it works for everybody. What if I were to tell you that the sentence not A or B is false, right? So I'm getting to the whole. And I were to say that this negation sentence is true, how would you work backward? So if the or is false and the or is the main connective, what must be the case? Yeah, B must be false and not A must be false, which means A must be true. If not either, if the neither or the not part of the neither is true, that means that the or is false, which means that A is and B is. So that's one way to think about it. Now let's work forward. So, Matthew, what if we say something like this? Not A and B. And I keep saying Matthew only because he was kind enough to raise the issue. But that doesn't mean that it's this, what we're talking about is not applicable to all of us. Okay. What is the scope of the negation? Does the negation cover the entire sentence? Just the? What? We don't have to worry about B because B is an atomic sentence. That means that the conjunction is the main one. So in terms of order of operations, we work the values of the negation first and the values of the conjunction second. Yeah? Okay. So given our referent columns, what are we going to write? False. So 4 values, right? 2 atomic sentences. So false. Yeah, are you guys
we're going
comfortable
that
coming
one.
to our standard reference columns?
Okay.
Yeah? This might make you feel better. How about I do this? True. Here are our original values. Yeah? Okay. So negation true,
False.
negation true,
False.
negation false,
True.
negation false.
True.
Good. False conjunction true, false conjunction false, true conjunction true,
True.
true conjunction false. What do you think? A little better?
Yeah.
I know I kind of rushed through it because we're at time, but
I was just confused about what order we were like looking at everything.
yeah, so we build from our atomic constituents up through sub-operators or sub-connectives, depending on how many there are, to our main connective. Okay, really, really good. So keep working on stuff that either you haven't finished or that was troubling you that you feel like you feel more comfortable with now. And then we'll really dig deep into chapter 4 on Thursday. So please bring questions, problems, and I'll try not to drop my computer.